I also decided to start using Polybar. So today I'm going to show you how to define a custom script module. So if you're new to this channel, remember to subscribe and ding the little bell icon down below because it'll really help the channel out. I'm aiming for 1,000 subs and any help would be really appreciated. So now that's out of the way, let's get started. Good afternoon everyone and welcome back to the channel. So it's not too difficult to define a custom module within Polybar, but when you first look at it, it might be a bit confusing and there's some changes between this and i3 blocks that are a bit confusing and might break some of your old scripts, but a lot of the time you can actually migrate your scripts directly over. You might have to change some stuff with the color formatting, but the general output will usually work roughly the same. So I'll show you what some of my scripts look like right now and how I'm actually using them within Polybar. So let's have a look at that. So I've changed my wallpaper in case you couldn't tell, and yes, I'm a massive weeb, so hey, you guys haven't complained yet. I don't know why. I would have thought more people would complain about that than the beard, but anyway, that's not too important. So in my scripts folder, I've got a couple of scripts. A lot of these i3 ones are still being used in my current configuration, but the main ones that I've had to change are the ones that use different color formatting. So if we jump down to that, not the launch Polybar. So I've got this like poly battery, poly CPU, and poly temp. So the output for this is very similar to what you would have done for i3. Pretty much what it will do is it'll take the final output of the script and then it will dump that within the block. So if I actually show you what the, I guess the format of the module thing is, and then we can actually work from there. So you've probably, if you've done anything with Polybar before, you've probably seen the actual configuration file. So that is in the .config folder, in the Polybar folder, in a file called config. So I'll do a separate video on like the general configurations, but the main thing we're going to be looking at is just defining the modules today. So if you don't know, you can decide which modules are going to be actually displayed within your status bar with these two commands here, the modules left, the modules right, and also module center, which I'm not using. So modules left will obviously dump stuff on the left side, modules right will dump stuff on the right side. And as you can see, time is on this side and weather then. So if we jump down to one that's actually a script, I believe a good one might be the time will work, because I've got some in here that are scripts and some that are IPC, and I want to do a full dedicated video on IPC because it is a bit confusing and it is really useful though. So the first thing we want to do is actually write out the module tag like you would have seen with the default configs. So it's the same as the other ones. You put the square brackets, then module, then slash, and the name of the module. So in this case, I've got one called time. I decided to write my own time module. I know that there's a default one. I'm not a big fan of it. I prefer my one. Anyway, so the first thing that you're going to want to have in this that will actually make sure it's defined as a script is this type. So if you set the type to custom/script, that'll say to Polybar, this is a custom script. Use the custom script configurations and read the commands that come with that. So the main three things that you want to have are the type, exec, and interval. So exec says the command that you run, and that is what generates the output that's dumped in the actual bar or up in the modules up here. And the interval is how often that script is run. So you also have the option of having infinitely looping scripts, and I'll talk about those towards the end. I don't have any like that. I just use it like this with the just general interval. So let's say we want to have a, did I mention what script I wanted to do in this video? I don't even know if I did. We're just going to define a script now, and it's going to be to output the number of packages that I have installed with Pacman. So I guess we can put that up where I've got the updates, because that'll work, I guess. So where's that? It's right near the top. Obviously you don't have to define them in the order that you put them within your actual output. I just like it to be like that so it's easy to find them. So let's go through this. So module slash, then we'll call it Pacman, because I've already got one called Pacman packages. That should probably be called updates. I'll fix that later. Doesn't matter right now. So the type, we're going to set it to custom/script. The command that we're going to run is just Pacman-Q. I'll turn off my compositor. I just realized I probably should have turned that off before. Okay, that should make it a bit easier to read now. So the command we're going to run in here is Pacman-Q. Obviously, you could use whatever command you want to use. And then we're just going to count the number of lines. So that's WC-L. And then the next thing we want is how often we want this script to run. So the number of packages we're going to have probably won't update too often. So let's say we want it to run every, I don't know, 10 minutes. So that's difficult. Let's go every 6 minutes because that's just an easy number in my head. So we'll have it update that is every 10 minutes. I can't do maths. 6 minutes would be 360 seconds. So this interval is defined in seconds. So this is 600 seconds, which is 10 minutes, not 6 minutes. I just can't count, ignore me. So this is the main stuff that you need. So there are other things that you can add to this, but if we were to save this now and put this within our bar, we should see up the top that it will tell us how many packages we actually have installed. So let's put this just up here. So Pacman. So now that'll be on the right side, right after this Pacman packages here. And we'll save that, and I'll reload my bar. I found that's a different key, didn't I? So there we go. Now it says 933. So that is every single package that I have installed on my system. That's all my dependencies, all the packages I intended to install, everything that's available. Okay, so let's go over some of the other stuff that you can do. So if we jump back down to the time one, we'll see some of the stuff that I have in here. So I also have this click left. So what click left will do is it's actually a really cool thing. So you can do other things besides click left. You can say you can have click middle, click right, double click left, double click middle, double click right, and you can also have scroll up and scroll down. So what this will let you do is actually run another command when you do some form of click or scroll on that actual part of your polybar. So let's say we want to have it do something like, I don't know, just open up a terminal. So if we find that again, I should have just searched for it. So let's say we have click left. Then we want to, I don't know, open up the terminal. So I've got my terminal defined within my terminal environment variable. So I save that, I reload my polybar, and as you can see, it changes my cursor when I hover over that. It will depend obviously on your cursor theme whether it does that, but for mine it will. So I'll click that, and there we go. It opens up a new instance of ST. So if we look at, say, my time, for example, when I click on this, it'll open up CalCurse. Or when I click on my torrents, it'll bring up transmission, and for time, it'll bring up UlsaMixer. So I don't typically click on the bar, but I think it's just cool to have that option there. And if you ever want to use it, then you're going to want it to actually be there. But since I don't, I just have it there because it's cool. So the next stuff we have is the formatting stuff. So let's actually pinch directly from this part here. Okay, so we have the format prefix, the format underline, the format background, and the format padding. This isn't everything that you can do. There are a couple other things, and I'll show you those in a second, but firstly we're going to go over what we have here. So the format prefix, if you notice that before this actual output here, we have this little box, this emoji box. So this basically says, before the output is shown, show this. So you could put some text here. You don't have to put an emoji. You could put anything you want here. So let's say you want to have installed, for example. And I like to put a space after it because it won't put a space in by default. And I don't particularly want to have it like rubbing up against the text. The format underline, you probably can't see it too well. But actually, I'll change the color here so you might be able to see it better. FF0. So we reload my polybar, and that'll set the color under here to yellow. So this line here, the format underline, defines the actual color of the underline. If you don't want to have an underline, then you don't have to. I like them. I think they look pretty cool. So the format background is just the background color behind the actual module, and the padding is the amount of space between the edge of the output and the edge of the module. So if we were to set this to 0, we'll see what that does. So I reload the config again, and as you can see, the edge of the module ends where the edge of the text is. I don't particularly like that. I think it looks a bit better actually having a bit of padding there. I'm not sure how the padding is measured. I think it might be character width, but I'm not entirely sure. Someone correct me on that. All I know is that when I put in 1, I like the look of it. So just play around with the setting you want and then find something you like. So as you see, we have this format prefix here now. So now it says installed before it actually shows our output. Okay, so there are some other stuff you can do in here besides what I have. I'm not using any of it, but let's have a brief look at what you can do. So you can also have a format foreground, which will just change the color of the foreground text. So let's actually do that. Let's say we want the foreground color to be, I don't know, yellow, because I can remember that color off the top of my head. Okay, so we reload that now, and the polybar entirely disappeared. That's because I put in background, not foreground. So if you make a single mistake in your polybar, it will completely break the entire polybar and it won't load. So make sure that you actually have everything working properly, because otherwise it'll be very difficult to debug. Reload that now, and as we can see now, the text here is yellow. Okay, so what's some other stuff that we can do? We can also change some stuff with the label. So if we have this command in here, so we'll copy this over and put that on a new line. So this first part here, this output, what this will do is just output the text, but you can also add some extra stuff. So if you've worked with Python before, you've probably seen this range syntax before. So 0 to 15 means that it will show the first 15 characters and then it will just cut the output. So I've only got 3 characters here, so let's just set this to 2. And then this next part will say what to show after the actual range has ended. So if we do it like this, this will cut it off at 93, and then it will just show an ellipse afterwards. It's probably not the best example for this, but it will work for the sake of an example. There we go. So it says 93 ... You can obviously change this to anything else. So if you want to change this to like hello world, then go right ahead and do that. There we go. So now it says 93 hello world. That's probably not the best idea to have that, but you can do it if you want to. So this last thing that we have in here, I'm not really sure how it works. I haven't been able to find any documentation on it just yet. This format right here. So I would love to tell you how that works, but I haven't seen anything about how it works anywhere in the documentation just yet. If someone can link me to where it is, I will do a extra comment about that, or I will do a separate video on it. But for now, I'm not really sure how this format works. Most of the time, you're not really going to use it, especially if you're doing stuff like I'm doing, where I'm just printing out static text and maybe showing a color with it. So for stuff like that, you don't need it. But if you want to do more complicated stuff, like say have a volume bar that you can select, then it might be a bit more difficult to do, and you probably can't even do it without knowing how that works. So as I said, if someone knows how that works, let me know and I will do a separate video on it. So the last thing I wanted to show you for just the general stuff, actually there's 2 last things. One of them is ExactIf. So ExactIf is really, really useful. So right now we've just got this exec. So what if we want to make it so that this command will only run if something else is successfully run? So let's say we want to, for example, with this weather up here, let's say we only want to actually run the weather script if we have an internet connection. I can't remember the exact way to test that, but what you can do is you can use the ExactIf command. So if you go ExactIf, and then I'll just say test for network. So if you were to have a command to test if you're connected to the network, and then you want to say display the weather, or you want to, I don't know, check your emails, then you can do that with the ExactIf command, because otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to have to do error handling for if the script fails, and it's much easier just to test if the script will succeed before even bothering to run it. That just makes your actual script far easier to use, so you don't have to worry about doing like, oh, do I have an internet connection? Is my connection going to drop out? Anything like this. If you just use ExactIf, then you can basically deal with that within the polybar. But obviously, if you want to do the error handling some other way, then go right ahead and do that. So the other thing I wanted to mention is you don't have to run a command directly in here. If we look at my module torrents here, I'm just running, it's obviously an IPC, so it's a little different, but the idea is basically the same. I'm running a custom script from a separate file, so you don't actually have to just run the command in here. If you've got a longer command or a bunch of commands you want to run, you can put them in a separate script file, and then you can just call it from within here. So just like you would be able to do with something like i3 blocks. So let's go to the other thing that I want to mention, which was tail, and then I'll get to how to actually do formatting from a script, because that is also kind of cool. And I should have probably mentioned it earlier, because it's how I'm actually getting this color up here to change. You might not have seen it during this video, but if it goes above a certain threshold, then it will change the color of the output. To actually use a infinite loop, you have to use the tail command and set it to true. and then make sure you're not doing something where it's going to be running every single CPU cycle. What you want to do is, say for example with this date script, so what it will do is it'll run, and then it will sleep for a second, and then it will run and sleep and run and sleep. So if you do it like that, you can have a script basically executing every single second, then you can just continuously read the output. So that's the other way you could do something like a time. Instead of relying on the interval, you could also use sleeps. It really depends on what you're doing. Some stuff intervals might be better, some stuff sleeps might be better. It'll really depend on how you like writing your scripts and how you just want to actually work with it. So I've been just using shell scripts this entire time, but you don't have to use shell scripts. You can also use Python or Perl, anything that you can output something with. So literally any programming language under the sun. But you're probably going to be using Python or maybe Perl, or if you're like me, you're going to do everything in shell script. So that's also an option there if you do feel like doing something else. So I'll get to the formatting stuff because that is actually pretty cool. So this is what I wanted to mention. So you can actually output a foreground color with your output so that you can change it while you're actually running it. So you can do other things like background color, you can do reverse the background and foreground colors, you can do an underline, overline, you can even change the font, the offset, and you can even define an action handler. That might be how you do those scripts where you have something like you click on a certain part of a bar and then it will change to that. So there's a volume script that works like that. So you probably have to do that with the action handler, but I'm not entirely sure. That seems a bit out of my ballpark, at least at this stage. So let's have a look at one of my scripts where I'm actually using the custom foreground, because that's the only one I'm actually using right now. So one like that would be the polytemp. So if we look at this, so if the output is above 85 degrees, then it will output this weird looking syntax right here. So percentage, then curly braces, F, and then the color. And then for greater than 65, it'll output yellow. So that one was red there. And then after that, it'll output the actual text. So if we look at what that actually looks like just in a regular output. So we write polytemp, oh no, that's not the wrong one. I'm just below the temperature threshold. My bad. Let's just change that to 40 so that I can show you what that looks like. So when it's not above the threshold, it'll just output normally. But if it is above the threshold, then it'll also output this. And that is red there. We can see it up there. So now it is yellow up here. This is read by Polybar as change the foreground color to this hex value. I'm not sure how to use the colors that you define within the Polybar yet. Right now I've only worked out how to do it with the actual hex values. So it's not as seamless as I'd like it to be, at least at this stage. There's probably some way to do it, I just haven't worked it out yet. But you don't have to do this with the foreground color, as I said before. You can do that with the font, you can do it with the underline color, the overline color, any of this stuff that you can format in here. You just have to look at the syntax. So for background color, it is this B instead of an F. For the reverse foreground and background colors, you do R instead of having a hex value in there. For underline color, you do a lowercase u, and you can look at all this stuff in your own time. And basically that'll let you do things like, say, for example, I've got this, so if my temperature goes above 85 degrees Celsius, it'll turn the color to red. If it goes above 65, it'll change it to yellow. Or with my battery, if it's below, I think 20%, it'll change it to red. With my CPU usage, I think if it's above like 80% or something, it changes to red, and I think above 50, it's yellow or something like that. I can't remember exactly what I had set it to, but this will let you have some extra indication of what's happening on your system, and I really like that. Obviously, you could do it with i3 blocks, and if you are using i3 blocks right now and you do want to switch over to Polybar, you'll notice the syntax is a bit different, but it's not too difficult to convert your scripts over. For me, it only took maybe like 5 minutes or so. So if you do want to continue using those scripts, just basically, pretty much all you had to do was move the statement for selecting the color above the output instead of being below the output. And then it pretty much works once you change it over to this syntax. So I think that might be pretty much everything for just general Polybar scripts. I'm going to do a separate video on configuring Polybar, and I want to do an entire video on IPC, because IPC, it is really cool and it can get complicated very quickly if you don't really look at it properly. But I don't know, I think I prefer it to the way that i3 Blocks does it, but I'm still deciding how I feel about it. So If you like this video, remember to smash that like button and leave me a comment down below letting me know what you think. Down below, I've got my library link, so if you want to see my videos on a platform that isn't YouTube, go check that out. I've also got my Discord, so if you want to chat with me, go check that out as well. I'm around most days, so if you feel like talking to me, just at me or just leave a message in general or something. Up on that corner, I've got the playlist this video is in, so go check that out if you want to see other videos like this. Down below, I've also got my support link, so if you want to support the channel, go there. Feel free to send me any money. You can send me some LBC, Bitcoin, or you can even donate to my Patreon if you feel like doing that. So I think that's pretty much everything for me now, so I'm out.